Two poor twin sisters wait every day at the train station, holding a photo in their hands. The young billionaire, curious, asks, "I see you here every day. Who are you waiting for?" They reply, "Our dad. This photo is of him when he was young." He looks at the photo and falls to his knees. The 6:15 train slowed down as it approached Hillside Station. Wesley stored the documents he was reviewing into his brown leather briefcase and adjusted his navy blue tie. The trip had been productive. 2 contracts signed, a new partnership formed, numbers that made shareholders smile, but did nothing to warm his empty apartment. Hillside Station was just a connection, another dot on the map of his constant business trips. Nothing special. Red brick walls, an old clock high on the main wall, rows of green benches under a metal roof. Wesley knew the place well. It had been his stop 3 times a week for the past 8 months. "We've arrived, sir," announced the train attendant with that rehearsed formality. "Next connection in 40 minutes. Wesley stepped off the carriage and felt the cold afternoon air on his face. He adjusted his coat over his arm and held the briefcase firmly. He considered heading to the station's coffee shop to review the contract for his next meeting. Black coffee with no sugar, open laptop, spreadsheets, his perfect routine. That was when he saw them for the first time. 2 little girls sitting side by side on one of the green benches, alone. The taller one wore a red coat with gold buttons. The smaller one had a blue ribbon in her hair. Something about the scene unsettled him. Such young children, all by themselves at a train station. Strange. Wesley hesitated, glanced around looking for an accompanying adult but saw no one. He shrugged and continued toward the coffee shop. The following week, they were there again. Same time, same bench. The girl in the red coat carefully held a piece of paper, as if it was something precious. Both watched intently every time a train arrived. By the 3rd week, Wesley was already looking for them as soon as he stepped off the train. And there they were, faithful sentinels at their green post. The scene intrigued him. There was something both sad and beautiful in that waiting. On the 4th week, his curiosity overcame his usual reserve. Instead of heading to the coffee shop, Wesley walked toward the green bench. The girls watched him approach, their eyes alert and curious. They didn't seem afraid, just slightly wary. "Are you waiting for someone?" Wesley asked, his voice a bit husky from not being used to starting conversations. The 2 looked at each other quickly, as if silently debating whether they should answer. It was the taller one who spoke first. "Our dad. This photo is of him when he was young," she said, turning over the paper she held, revealing a photograph. "He went off by train looking for a job. Mom said someday he'll come back." The smaller girl added in a soft voice, "We come here so he won't pass by without seeing us when he arrives." Wesley looked at the photo, and the world around him seemed to freeze. The noise of the station disappeared. The announcements from the loudspeakers turned into a distant murmur. His hands grew cold despite the warm day. The photo showed a face Wesley knew all too well, a face that belonged to his oldest memories, a face he hadn't seen in years, but never forgot. Conrad, his brother. Wesley tried to keep a neutral expression, but his heart pounded hard against his ribs. "That's a nice photo," he managed to say, his own voice sounding strange to his ears. "What are your names?" "I'm Ivy," said the taller one, the one in the red coat. "And I'm June," added the smaller one with the blue ribbon. Ivy showed the photo proudly. "Mom said he's very smart and handsome, that he'd get a good job soon and then come back to pick us up." Wesley studied the photo more carefully. It was definitely Conrad. Younger than the last time Wesley had seen him. The same crooked smile inherited from their father. The same eyes that always seemed to look beyond the horizon, searching for something no one else could see. "Do you come here often?" Wesley asked, trying to hide the quiver in his voice. "3 times a week," June answered, swinging her legs, which didn't reach the floor. "Our neighbor, Mrs. Miller, brings us—" "She's over there getting coffee," she said, pointing to the station snack bar. "Mom works a lot," Ivy explained. "She can't wait every day, but we can." The simplicity of that statement hit Wesley like a punch. The unshakable confidence of the children, their certainty that their father would return, their loyalty in waiting. "Has he been gone a long time?" Wesley asked, his mind racing in many directions. "A really long time," said June, frowning as if trying to figure it out. "I was really little." "But he sends us Christmas cards," Ivy quickly added, as though defending her absent father. "And birthday presents." Wesley knew that couldn't be true. Conrad had been missing for years. No contact, no trace. Something stirred inside him. Memories he had locked away in a distant part of his mind. The house where they grew up. Sibling fights. Laughter. Plans for the future. And then, the drift apart. Wesley climbing the corporate mountain without ever looking back. Conrad following his own path, simpler, freer. Their last conversation had been by phone. Harsh words were exchanged. Accusations were made. Silence grew until it became forgetfulness. Neither of them ever called back. The years passed. Their lives went different ways. And now, two little girls sat on a train platform, waiting for someone who never returned. "How long do you stay here?" Wesley asked. "Until the last train," Ivy replied, looking at the tracks. "Sometimes he gets in late," Mom said. Wesley felt a tightness in his chest. Their innocence, their waiting, the kind lies someone was telling them to protect them from the truth. An announcement sounded over the loudspeakers. The next train was arriving. Wesley checked his watch, his connection. "I have to go," he said, adjusting his briefcase. "It was nice meeting you, Ivy and June." The girls waved with identical smiles, smiles that reminded him of someone. Wesley turned and walked toward the opposite platform, where his train was waiting. Inside the carriage, he couldn't concentrate on work. The image of the two girls waiting stayed in his mind, and the photo of Conrad, young, smiling, full of hope. Conrad, his brother. The brother he'd grown up with, the brother he'd lost by choice, the brother who apparently had a family, and then disappeared. Wesley took out his phone and scrolled through his contact list. Conrad's number was still there, never erased, never used. His finger hovered over the call button, hesitating. The train entered a tunnel, and the signal dropped. Wesley put the phone back in his pocket and looked out the window, seeing only his own reflection in the dark glass. When the train emerged from the tunnel, the sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky orange and pink. The city lights began to flicker in the distance. Wesley returned to the open contract on his laptop, but the words and numbers no longer made sense. The image of the two girls, of the photo of his lost brother, everything mixed in his mind, preventing him from focusing. What had happened to Conrad? Why were those girls waiting for him? Who was their mother? Questions without answers. And sitting on that train that carried him away from the station, away from the girls, away from the past that had returned like a ghost. Wesley knew he would come back, not just to catch his usual connection, but to find out the truth, to get answers, to understand what had happened to Conrad, and maybe, just maybe, to learn something about himself in the process. Wesley couldn't sleep that night. The faces of the girls at the station haunted his thoughts. Ivy and June, two nieces he never knew he had, daughters of Conrad, the brother with whom he'd lost all contact. He got up before sunrise, made a strong cup of coffee and sat in front of his computer. The screen illuminated his face in the still dark apartment. He cancelled the day's meetings with a quick email. "Urgent family matters," he wrote to his secretary. It was the first time in years he'd used family as an excuse. His first step was to search Conrad's name in public databases. His brother wasn't the type to leave a digital trail. He'd always preferred to live on the margins of the system. No social media, no known email account. Conrad was a ghost in the digital world, exactly how he wanted to be. Wesley picked up the phone and called an old contact. "Martin, it's Wesley. I need a favor." Martin was a private investigator, a discreet man Wesley had hired a few times to check the background of potential business partners. He never imagined using Martin's services to find his own brother. "Send me the details by email," Martin said. "And it's going to cost more than usual, considering the urgency." "Money is not an issue," Wesley answered, hanging up. In the following hours, Wesley rummaged through drawers he hadn't opened in years. He found a box of old photographs. He and Conrad at the beach, teenagers, both at their high school graduation. The last photo together, at their mother's birthday, shortly before Wesley moved to take his first executive job. He scanned one of the pictures and emailed it to Martin, along with all the information he had about Conrad. It wasn't much: age, last known address, last job. A whole life reduced to a few short paragraphs. Martin's reply came 2 days later, faster than Wesley had expected. "I found a few things about your brother," said the raspy voice on the phone. "Not much, but enough to start with. I've sent the file to your email. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Wesley hesitated for an instant. "I am," he finally replied. The file contained fragments of Conrad's life over the past few years, temporary jobs, addresses changing every few months, and then something more solid. Conrad had lived for almost 2 years in a rental house on the outskirts of the city with a woman named Margot Klein. Wesley read and reread the name, Margot, the girl's mother. It had to be. Martin had included a copy of the rental agreement. Only 2 names, Conrad Wilson and Margot Klein. No mention of children. "Can you find out where this Margot lives now?" Wesley asked in a new call. "I already did," Martin replied. "It's in the report, page 3. She moved 5 years ago to a small apartment in the East District. She works as a seamstress at a repair shop in the Riverside Shopping Center." Wesley thanked him and hung up. He looked at the address on the screen. A simple neighborhood, far from the center, away from the places he frequented, a different world from his. In the days that followed, Wesley returned to his work routine, but something had changed. In meetings, he found himself thinking about the girls on the platform. During train rides, he stared out the window, wondering where Conrad might be. At night, he reread Martin's report, searching for clues he might have missed. A week later, he made a decision. He put on simple clothes, jeans, a plain blue shirt, a worn leather jacket he rarely used. He drove himself instead of using his usual driver. He told his secretary he'd be unavailable all day. He drove to the Riverside Shopping Center first, a modest place with small stores and inexpensive cafes. He easily found the repair shop. Behind the counter, a middle-aged woman was helping a customer. It wasn't Margot. Wesley had gotten her photo from Martin. He waited outside, pretending to be interested in nearby window displays. An hour later, he saw a woman with curly brown hair leaving the shop. He checked the photo on his phone to confirm. It was her, Margot. He followed her from a distance, watching how she moved with quick, determined steps. She bought a sandwich at a snack bar, then stopped at a pharmacy. The routine movements of an ordinary life. Wesley felt like an intruder, a voyeur into someone else's life. He wondered if he should approach Margot right there, introduce himself, ask the questions that plagued him. But something held him back. It wasn't just curiosity driving him, it was guilt. Guilt for having drifted away from Conrad, for missing years of his life, for not being there when his brother needed him, for prioritizing his career, his success, his money over blood ties. When Margot boarded a bus, Wesley returned to his car. He wouldn't follow her any further that day. He had the address. He knew where to find her when he was ready. For 3 days, Wesley wrestled with himself. Should he seek out Margot? Should he introduce himself as Conrad's brother? What would he say to the girls if he met them? How would he explain his absence all these years? Questions without easy answers. On Wednesday, Wesley drove to the neighborhood where Margot lived. He parked 2 blocks away and walked slowly, feeling the weight of each step. The building was simple but well cared for. Exposed brick walls, 3 floors, no elevator, a pot of geraniums by the entrance, a child's bike chained to the stair rail. Wesley stopped in front of the building, looking up at the second-floor windows. Behind those cheap curtains were the answers he was seeking, and maybe even more questions. Something inside him, a voice he hadn't heard in years, told him he needed to go in, ring the bell, and face the past that had found him in the form of 2 girls at a train station. It wasn't curiosity that led him there. It was guilt, an old, deep guilt he carried like a stone in his pocket. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the quiet street. Wesley took 1 step toward the building's entrance, then another. His heart pounded in his chest. It was time to face what he had left behind. Wesley stood motionless in front of the building, gazing at the windows on the second floor. The child's bike chained to the railing confirmed what he already knew. Children lived there, his nieces. A gust of cold wind hit him, but it wasn't the wind that made him shiver. It was the weight of memories returning like a wave, sweeping away years of distance. He remembered the bedroom they shared when they were children, 2 beds separated by a small nightstand. Conrad's always messy, covered in books and sketch pads, his always neat, with books arranged alphabetically. "You need to learn to relax, Wessie," Conrad used to say, throwing a rolled-up sock ball at the ceiling. "Life isn't a spreadsheet." Conrad was always like that, light, free, unconcerned about the future, while Wesley planned every step since he was 12. The house they grew up in wasn't big or luxurious, but it was full of life. Their father, a mechanic, came home smelling of grease, telling funny stories about customers. Their mother, a teacher, always had a new book to share with them. They were happy, even without much money. Wesley leaned against the lamppost in front of the building, still unable to approach the door. The memories came now like scenes from a long-forgotten movie. Summers at the lake house borrowed from an uncle. Conrad diving in without fear of the height. Wesley calculating the perfect angle to jump. Competing over who could swim the farthest. Nights fishing under the stars. The Christmas when they got a bicycle to share. Conrad insisted Wesley use it first, even though Wesley was younger. "You'll enjoy it more than I do," he had said, with that natural generosity he always had. Wesley smiled at the memory. Conrad was always the better of the two, the kinder, the more honest. When their mother got sick, Wesley was 15, Conrad 17. It was the younger brother who visited her every day in the hospital. Wesley buried himself in studies, tests, future planning. It was his way of dealing with fear. "She asked about you today," Conrad would say when he got home. Never accusing, just a reminder. Their mother recovered, but something had changed between the brothers. A small crack no one noticed. The start of their separation. Wesley went off to college on a full scholarship. Business, economics, finance. He studied 16 hours a day and returned home less and less often. Conrad finished high school without big plans, worked as a waiter, then as an assistant in a print shop. "I'm getting to know the world," he'd say when their father asked about college. There are many ways to learn. Wesley landed an internship at a consulting firm in his second year. He was promoted before he even graduated. He moved into a small apartment close to work. "You should visit more," their father said over the phone. "Your mother misses you." "I'm busy," Wesley replied. "Next month will be better." But next month never came. When their parents died in a car accident on the way back from a weekend trip, the brothers were already nearly strangers. Wesley organized the funeral with practical efficiency. Conrad openly wept, hugging friends and relatives. "You don't cry anymore?" Conrad asked on the night after the burial, while they cleared out the childhood home. "Crying doesn't help," Wesley answered. "We have to move on." Conrad looked at him as if he were seeing a stranger. "Who are you, Wesley? What happened to my brother?" Wesley didn't answer. There was no answer. Or maybe there was. But he wasn't ready to admit it. The final split came naturally. Wesley sold their parents' house, split the money with Conrad, then left for a better position in another city. Their calls grew shorter and more infrequent. Birthday messages became stiff, Christmas cards generic. There was no definitive fight, no explosive argument marking a before and after, just a silence growing day by day, month by month, until it turned into forgetfulness. A forgetfulness Wesley encouraged as he dove into work to escape from himself. Standing outside that simple building that now housed part of his family, Wesley finally allowed himself to ask the question he'd avoided for years. Was it worth it? The large apartments he lived in, always alone, the cars he bought and barely drove, the business trips to places he never had time to explore, the women who passed through his life leaving no trace except for perfume on the sheets, the corner office with a view of the river, the respect of colleagues who were really just competitors waiting for him to slip, the money piling up in accounts that never served his real needs. Was it worth giving up all this for Conrad's smiles? For the chance to meet his nieces? For having a real family? Wesley ran a hand over his face, feeling the roughness of his unshaven beard. He wasn't wearing his custom-tailored Italian suit. He wasn't shielded by his efficient secretary. He wasn't hidden behind his mahogany desk. He was just Wesley, Conrad's brother, uncle to two little girls waiting on a train platform for a father who didn't come back. A woman passed him on the sidewalk, throwing him a suspicious look. Wesley realized he must look odd, standing there for so long. He took a few steps toward the building door, then stopped again. What would he say? How would he introduce himself? "Hello, I'm the uncle you never knew because I was too busy being important." The sun was slowly setting, and the first lights were turning on in the building's windows. Somewhere inside, Margot was making dinner for her daughters, Conrad's daughters, Wesley's nieces he never knew existed. Guilt gripped his chest like an invisible fist. Not just for losing touch with Conrad, but for wasting so much time, for choosing the path that seemed right, but led him away from what truly mattered. Wesley took a deep breath and looked at the darkening sky. It was time to leave the past behind. It was time to find out what had happened to his brother. It was time to meet his family. He took a step toward the building's entrance, then another, and another. Wesley climbed the 2 flights of stairs slowly, counting each step as if it might delay the inevitable. The second-floor hallway was narrow, with wallpaper peeling at the corners and simple light fixtures casting a yellowish glow. Apartment 204. The door was plain wood, with a small peephole at eye level and a worn welcome mat at the threshold. He raised his hand to knock but hesitated. What was he doing here? What did he expect to find? Answers. Redemption. A connection with the brother he'd lost. He took a deep breath and knocked 3 times, firm knocks, confident, very different from the turmoil he felt inside. For a moment, there was no answer, just silence and the distant sound of a TV in another apartment. Wesley almost felt relieved. Maybe no one was home. Maybe he could postpone this confrontation, reorganize his thoughts, prepare a better speech. Then he heard light footsteps approaching. A female voice asked, "Who is it?" Wesley swallowed hard. "My name is Wesley Wilson. I need to speak with Margot Klein." The peephole opened, and a pair of brown eyes observed him cautiously. After a moment, there was the sound of a chain being removed, followed by the click of the lock. The door opened partially, still held by a security chain. The woman looking at him through the crack had brown hair tied in a messy bun. She wore a simple t-shirt and sweatpants. Her eyes, despite the initial suspicion, were kind. "I'm Margot. What do you want?" Wesley straightened up, feeling the weight of this moment. Years of distance, choices, and silence concentrated in a single instant. "I'm Wesley, Conrad's brother." Margot's eyes went wide with genuine surprise. Suspicion gave way to confusion. She closed the door briefly, not to lock him out, but to remove the security chain. When the door opened fully, her face revealed a shock Wesley hadn't expected. Conrad never mentioned he had a brother. Her words hit Wesley like a silent knife, cutting deep into something vital within him. His eyes stung, he felt the blood drain from his face. For a moment, the hallway seemed to spin around him. Conrad never talked about him, never mentioned his existence. As if Wesley had been wiped out of his brother's life entirely. It wasn't just forgetfulness, it was a deliberate erasure, a chosen absence. "May I come in?" he managed to ask, his own voice sounding odd to him. Margot hesitated for a moment, analyzing him carefully. Then she nodded and stepped aside. "The girls aren't here," she said, as if that explained her decision. "They're at ballet class with the neighbor." Wesley entered a small hallway that led directly into the living room. The apartment was modest but cozy, a combined living area and open kitchen, all in one well-organized space. A sofa with colorful cushions, a dining table for 4, plants in hand-painted ceramic pots, children's drawings stuck to the fridge with bright magnets. A home. A real home. "Would you like some coffee?" Margot offered, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Wesley nodded, still processing the impact of that first revelation. Conrad never mentioned having a brother, as if an entire part of his life had been erased, as if Wesley had never existed. "Sugar?" Margot asked, turning on the coffee maker. "No, thank you, black." She motioned toward the sofa. "Have a seat. Sorry about the mess." With little kids, it's hard to keep things in order. Wesley looked around. There was no real mess, just signs of life. A children's book open on the coffee table, a doll forgotten in a corner of the couch, a small coat draped over a chair, signs of a family. He sat on the sofa while Margot made the coffee. He watched her discreetly. She moved with precise efficiency. Small but strong hands, fingers marked by the work of a seamstress. "How did you find me?" she asked, bringing 2 cups of coffee and sitting on the chair opposite him. "I hired a private investigator," Wesley answered honestly. "After I saw the girls at the station," Margot's eyes widened. "You met Ivy and June." "At the train station. They were waiting." Wesley hesitated. "Waiting for Conrad." Margot lowered her gaze to her cup, a sad smile on her lips. "They go 3 times a week. Mrs. Miller, our neighbor, takes them when she can. I didn't have the heart to stop them." A tense pause ensued. Wesley took a sip of the coffee, strong and well made. "What happened to Conrad?" he finally asked. Margot took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. When she spoke, her voice was calm but carried an old weight. "I met Conrad at the print shop where he worked. I'd brought some fabric samples to make business cards for my sewing work. He helped me." She smiled at the memory. "Conrad had this way of making you feel special, you know. Like that moment, that conversation, was the most important thing in the world to him." Wesley knew that well. Conrad always had that gift, being fully present, something Wesley had never mastered. We started seeing each other. It was all very quick and intense. Within 3 months, we were living together. He was kind, funny. "A dreamer." Margot paused, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "His jobs never lasted very long. There was always some problem. The boss was unfair. The work was boring. He deserved more. Conrad had big dreams, but never a plan to achieve them," Wesley finished. Margot looked at him in surprise, then nodded. "Exactly." One night, he came home saying he'd heard about an incredible opportunity in another city. A publishing company was hiring. It was his dream job, working with books, with art. She took another deep breath before continuing. "We had an argument. Not a big fight, but I was tired of starting over, of living on hopes. I said things I regret. The next day, when I got home from work, I found a note. He said he was going after that opportunity and would be back in a few days, a week at most, once he had good news." Her voice trembled slightly. "That was almost 6 years ago." Wesley felt a knot in his throat. 6 years. The girls seemed about 5, as maybe 6 years old. "A week later, I found out I was pregnant," Margot went on, confirming Wesley's mental math. "I tried every number I had for him, sent messages. Nothing. At first, I feared something had happened, some accident. Then I began to think maybe he'd just decided not to come back." She spoke without self-pity, simply stating a painful fact. "Conrad left to find a job and never returned. I discovered I was pregnant after he left. He never knew." Wesley felt the weight of those words. Conrad didn't even know he was going to be a father. Never met his daughters. Never knew about the 2 little girls who faithfully waited for him at the train station. "Did you try looking for him?" "The police?" "I filed a missing person report," Margot replied. "But without details of where he was headed, they couldn't do much. I thought about hiring a detective like you did, but I couldn't afford it." She motioned around the simple apartment. "When I learned they were twins, it was scary. Me alone and with no close family, expecting 2 babies. But I managed. I have a steady job now. Neighbors who help. The girls are healthy and happy." Wesley looked around again, this time with new eyes. What once seemed like a simple apartment now looked like a monument to Margot's strength, raising 2 daughters alone, building a safe home, staying strong despite being abandoned. That was when he noticed the photo on the shelf next to the TV. The same photo he'd seen in the girl's hands at the station. Conrad, younger, smiling that carefree smile he'd always had. Wesley stood and went over to the photo. The same eyes, the same rebellious hair, the same determined chin the girls had inherited from their father. "They love that photo," Margot said, joining him. "It's the only image of their father they have." Wesley touched the frame gently, as if afraid it might break. "What did you tell them?" About Conrad. Margot crossed her arms in an unconscious, protective gesture. At first, they were too young to ask. When they started noticing other kids had dads, I told them he was working far away, that one day he'd come home. She let out a long sigh. They think he's just working far away. I never knew how to say he might not come back. Her eyes met Wesley's, searching for understanding. It's not exactly a lie. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he is working somewhere. Maybe he's... She didn't finish the sentence. So they started going to the station, Wesley concluded. It was their idea. One day Ivy asked how their dad would come home, and I said, without thinking, probably by train. The following week, they asked to go to the station to see if Daddy was arriving. I thought it would be a one-time thing that they'd soon forget. But hope became a way to survive, Wesley said. Margot looked at him surprised, then nodded slowly. Yes, their hope became something precious. Something I didn't have the heart to destroy. Wesley sat back down, feeling the weight of her story. Conrad had vanished completely, left a pregnant woman behind, never knowing he'd be a father, never contacting her again, and never once mentioned he had a brother. The silence stretched between them for a long moment, heavy with unasked questions, untaken paths, lost possibilities. "Why are you here, Wesley?" Margot finally asked. After all this time, why look for Conrad now? It was a fair question. Wesley didn't have a ready answer, or maybe he had several, all incomplete. "I thought I might help find him," he said, realizing how half-true that sounded. "There's something you're not telling me," Margot observed, her eyes suddenly sharp. "Have there been any updates about him?" Wesley realized Margot was far more perceptive than she appeared. A single mother raising 2 daughters alone wouldn't be easily fooled. "No," he replied, holding her gaze. "No news of him." That at least was true. There had been no recent updates. What he knew or suspected dated back years, and he wasn't ready to share that possibility. Not yet. Not before being certain. "You have more questions," Margot said. "I can see it in your eyes." Wesley hesitated. He had so many questions. So many gaps to fill. So many missing pieces. "Did Conrad ever talk about me?" he finally asked, knowing the answer, but needing to hear it. Margot slowly shook her head. "Never. He said very little about his family overall. Mentioned his parents had passed away, but never talked about siblings. I always assumed he was an only child." Each word was like a small cut. Conrad had erased Wesley from his narrative, deleted his older brother from his story. The pain of that was deeper than Wesley expected. "I see," was all he could manage. "Did you two have a falling out?" Margot asked gently. Wesley looked at his hands, clean, well-groomed, hands that had never known calluses or grease stains like his father's. Hands that signed contracts but had never rocked a child to sleep. "There wasn't a big fight," he replied. "We just went different ways. I went one way, he went another. And one day, we realized there were no more intersecting paths." It was the truth, though incomplete. There was more guilt than he could admit out loud. More responsibility, more regret. "He was lonely," Margot said softly. "Even in the middle of a crowd, surrounded by people, Conrad seemed to look for something that was missing." Wesley nodded silently. Conrad had always been that way, restless, seeking something beyond the horizon, something that might not even exist. The sound of a key in the door interrupted them. Margot stood up quickly. "That's the girls," she said with a hint of nervousness. "I didn't know they'd be back so soon." Wesley also stood, suddenly alarmed. He wasn't ready for this. Not now, not like this. Margot seemed to sense his panic. "You can stay," she said, "or you can go if you'd prefer. But if you stay, I won't say who I am," Wesley finished. "Not yet," she nodded, grateful for his understanding. The door began to open. The door opened fully, and 2 small figures burst in like a whirlwind of color, light curls bouncing, pink and purple backpacks, ballet slippers dangling from their shoulders. They both froze when they saw Wesley standing in the living room, as if they had rehearsed the perfect synchronized stop. "Who's he, Mom?" asked the one in the blue sweater. June Dees, Wesley recognized from the station. Before Margot could answer, Ivy, the other girl, took a step forward, her eyes widening in recognition. "I know you. You talked to us at the station." Wesley's heart raced. He hadn't expected to be recognized so easily. He nodded with a small smile. "Yes, we met there." Margot looked from Wesley to the girls, clearly surprised by the existing connection. "This is Mr. Wesley," she explained carefully. He knew your dad." Wesley held his breath. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it created an expectation he wasn't sure he could fulfill. The girl's eyes lit up instantly. All hesitation vanished. In a single moment, Wesley went from being a stranger to something far more precious, a connection to their missing father. "Your dad's friend?" asked June, moving closer with her eyes shining in hope. Wesley glanced at Margot, who gave him a slight nod, permitting him to maintain that story. "Yes," he said at last. "I met your dad a long time ago." It wasn't a lie, after all. He had known Conrad better than anyone, or so he thought, until learning that his brother never mentioned him. That simple confirmation was like opening a floodgate. The girls rushed toward him, forgetting any stranger danger, replaced by the excitement of knowing someone connected to their father. "Do you work with him?" Ivy asked, grabbing his hand as if they were old friends. "Is he okay?" June chimed in, taking his other hand. "When is he coming back?" The questions flowed in an unstoppable stream. Wesley felt panic rising. He wasn't prepared for this. He didn't know what to say or how to navigate this minefield of childish hopes. Margot came to his rescue. "Girls, let Mr. Wesley breathe," she said gently but firmly. "He just came for a quick visit and you've only just arrived. Why don't you show him your drawings while I fix a snack?" Mentioning the drawings worked like magic to redirect the girls' energy. Ivy let go of his hand and ran to her backpack, while June pulled Wesley to the sofa. "I drew our house today at ballet," June announced, sitting beside him with surprising ease. "The teacher said I have talent." Ivy returned with a colorful folder, opening it on Wesley's lap, as though he were the most important person in the world to see her art. "This is the castle where we live," she explained, pointing to a vibrant drawing of a structure that looked more like a stack of bright blocks with flags on top. "And here's us, Mom, me, June, and our cat, Snowball." "We don't have a cat," June clarified, rolling her eyes. "She always draws a cat, but Mum won't let us have one." "I'll convince her someday," Ivy insisted determinedly. Wesley looked at the drawings with genuine interest. Bright colors, imaginative shapes, a unique worldview full of possibility. He could see traces of Conrad in those pictures, an unbounded imagination, a confident hand. "They're really pretty," he said sincerely. "How you think Dad will like them?" Ivy asked suddenly, serious. The question caught him off guard. The weight of their hope was almost tangible in the small living room. "I'm sure he would," he answered, sticking to the truth. Conrad always appreciated art in all its forms. June leaned closer, her blue eyes identical to those of Wesley's lost brother. "What's he like?" "Tell us." Wesley searched for the right words, navigating between the truths he knew and the girl's expectations. "He has a smile that lights up his whole face," he began, remembering his brother. "And he knows how to tell stories that make you lose track of time. When he laughs, everyone laughs with him." The girls drank in every word like sponges, forming in their minds an image of the father they barely knew. "Mom said he's really good at drawing," Ivy commented. "He is," Wesley confirmed. "He used to sketch entire stories in notebooks. When we were younger," he nearly slipped. "When we were children. When we were brothers. When we were a family." "Tell us more," June urged, tugging on his shirt sleeve with familiarity. And Wesley did. He told them stories of Conrad, adapted for young ears. The brother who built a treehouse, the teenager who saved an abandoned dog, the young man who played guitar on summer nights. The girls listened, fascinated, occasionally interrupting with questions or their own connections. "I like dogs too." June also plays music, on the school piano. At some point, Margot brought out a plate of sandwiches cut into triangles and cups of juice. She sat quietly in an armchair, watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. Wesley lost track of time. He didn't check his watch once, something unthinkable in his world of scheduled meetings and back-to-back commitments. The stories flowed, the drawings multiplied, laughter filled the apartment. At one point, June climbed onto his lap to show him a particularly intricate drawing, settling there as if it were her rightful place. Ivy sat next to him, leaning on his arm, sharing the weight of a storybook she got from school. The warmth of those small bodies against him awakened something in Wesley that had been dormant for a long time, a feeling no boardroom, no million-dollar deal, no professional accomplishment had ever given him, a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, a sense of family. The silence he carried inside, the emptiness cultivated by years of self-imposed isolation, began to crack. Not a sudden, dramatic break, but small fissures where light started to seep in. "Will you come visit us again?" Ivy asked, when afternoon gave way to early evening. Wesley met Margot's eyes from across the room, looking for some sign. She only inclined her head slightly, leaving the decision up to him. "If your mom allows," he answered carefully. "Of course she will," June exclaimed with the absolute certainty only children have. "You're Dad's friend. You can come whenever you want." Dad's friend, uncle, brother, family, mother. The words danced in his mind, each one carrying a weight of unspoken truths, of possible futures. "It's getting late," Margot said, standing up. "Bath time, girls." The protests came in unison, but without much conviction, a familiar routine. The negotiation of 5 more minutes, the deal of 1 more story and then the bath. The promise of, if you go now, you can pick out which pajamas to wear. The everyday family dance Wesley had never taken part in. The train cut through the night with a steady rhythm, lulling the few passengers still traveling at that hour. Wesley practically had the carriage to himself. He looked out the window but didn't see the dark landscape. Only his own reflection superimposed on the distant lights of small towns they passed. His phone kept buzzing in his pocket. Messages, emails, notifications of missed meetings. The world he'd built over the years was still turning, demanding his attention, his presence, his energy. A world that more just hours ago seemed fundamental, non-negotiable. A world that now felt distant, almost irrelevant. The image of the girls remained vivid in his mind, their excitement upon hearing stories about their father, the hope in their small eyes, the absolute faith that one day Conrad would come home, June's picture of a complete family, Ivy and her endless questions about their dad. Does he like chocolate ice cream or strawberry? Can he swim? Will he like my piano recital? Each question was a tiny needle pricking his chest, each hope an invisible weight on his shoulders. Because Wesley knew the truth they didn't, the truth Margot didn't know, the truth only he carried all these years. Conrad was dead. Wesley closed his eyes, finally letting the memory surface fully, without the walls he'd built to contain it, 4 years ago. An official envelope addressed to his company, searching for relatives of Conrad Wilson, a body discovered after a car accident on a remote road, far from the city, delayed identification due to lack of documents. Wesley remembered standing frozen in his luxurious office, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. Conrad was dead, his younger brother, the boy with the easy smile who played guitar on summer nights. The body had been at the county morgue for weeks, waiting for identification. Wesley signed the papers, authorized the release, paid for a simple funeral. Only he and a funeral home employee were present. No friends, no other family, no Margot, no daughters he didn't know existed. Conrad died without knowing he had daughters, without knowing he was going to be a father, perhaps chasing some distant dream, some opportunity that probably never existed. And now, 4 years later, 2 little girls sat every week at a train station, clutching a photo in their hands, waiting for the return of a man who would never come. The train took a curve, jostling Wesley from his memories. He opened his eyes and saw his reflection again, a man in an expensive suit, with dark circles under his eyes and an expression he no longer recognized. For years, he had done what he thought was right. He hadn't searched for Conrad when he disappeared. He hadn't tried to find anyone who might care about his death. He handled it like everything else in his life, with practical efficiency, no room for emotions that would complicate the process. Solve it, file it away, move on. But now the girls' faces changed everything. Their hope, their waiting, their childlike certainty that one day their father would return. Wesley took out his phone and checked his messages. 3 from his secretary asking where he was, 2 from the board questioning his absence at the quarterly meeting, 1 from his assistant reminding him to sign urgent documents. Mechanically, he typed a short reply. "Family emergency, I'll be out for a few days." Family. The word felt strange, distant. When was the last time he'd used that word about his own life? What should he do now? That question hammered in his head ever since he left Margot's apartment. Should he tell the truth, destroy the hope that had kept that little family afloat? Or should he simply return to his old life, pretend he never found the girls, never learned about them? That would certainly be easier, going back to his meetings, his contracts, his empty apartment. Let Margot continue with her illusion. Let the girls grow up thinking their father was just away, working, and someday would return. A benign lie, perhaps. But as the train moved through the night, Wesley knew he couldn't do that. He couldn't turn his back again. He couldn't choose the easy way out. Not this time. "I can't destroy that hope and then just carry on," he muttered to himself, the words barely audible above the train's steady rumble. "If I'm going to tell them, I have to stay." The thought surprised him with its clarity. It wasn't just about revealing the truth. It was about being there to face the consequences. It was about not running away, as he had done so many times before. It was about taking responsibility for something beyond numbers on a spreadsheet. Stay. The word echoed in his mind. What exactly did it mean to stay? Postpone meetings, take a vacation, move here, rebuild an entire life. Wesley didn't have answers to those questions. He only knew he couldn't just show up, drop the bomb that Conrad was dead, and then vanish, leaving Margot and the girls to handle the pain alone. If he chose to tell them, he'd have to stay for the next day. And the day after, and all the days when the questions would come. Why isn't Dad coming back? Where is he now? Did he love us? Questions to which he had no answers, but which he couldn't ignore. The train began to slow, approaching the next station. Wesley recognized the city lights. He was almost home. His luxurious apartment awaited him. His organized and predictable life. His controlled world where he was respected and feared, but never truly known. He grabbed the briefcase with the documents he hadn't been able to review. He straightened the tie he had loosened during the ride. He prepared to disembark. Yet something had changed. He was certain he had to make a decision. He knew that whichever path he chose, nothing would be the same. The train came to a complete stop. The doors opened. Wesley stood up and walked down the empty aisle. Once again, as so many times in his life, he faced a choice. But this time, it wasn't about his career, an investment, or a corporate strategy. It was about the kind of man he wanted to be, about the kind of life he wanted to live. Stepping onto the nearly deserted platform, Wesley felt the weight of the truth he carried, a weight he'd ignored for years but could no longer deny, a weight he was, for the first time, willing to bear. The train pulled away, leaving him alone on the platform. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow he would go back to Margot's apartment. Tomorrow he would begin to learn what it meant to stay. The next morning, Wesley woke before his alarm. Sitting on the edge of his king-size bed in his penthouse apartment, he surveyed the space around him as if seeing it for the first time. Expensive furniture chosen by a decorator. Abstract art on the walls, selected to match the color scheme, not for personal meaning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the financial district. A perfect, impeccable place, and completely empty. His phone vibrated on the nightstand. Without looking, he knew it would be urgent emails, meeting reminders, requests that couldn't wait. The world he had built over the years, spinning incessantly. "Martha," he said to his secretary on the phone, "I need you to cancel all my meetings today." The silence on the other end revealed her surprise. In 15 years of working together, Wesley had rarely cancelled commitments. "All of them?" she finally asked, keeping it professional. "Even the board lunch to discuss the acquisition?" "All of them," Wesley confirmed. "Ask James to represent me. Tell them a family issue has come up." Family. The word still sounded foreign on his lips, like a language he hadn't practiced in decades. 2 hours later, Wesley was standing outside the brick building where Margot lived. Wearing more casual clothes, jeans and a simple shirt, in one hand he carried a small bag containing children's books he'd bought along the way. Margot answered the door with a hint of surprise. "Wesley," she said, adjusting the apron she wore. The air smelled of something sweet baking. "The girls are at school." "I figured," he replied. "Actually, I came to talk to you." She hesitated briefly, then stepped aside. The apartment seemed different in the morning light, more alive, with sunlight shining through the windows, illuminating the potted plants on the windowsills. "I'm making cookies for the school party," Margot explained, heading back to the kitchen. Wesley followed, feeling awkwardly large for the domestic space. "I want to help," he said finally after sipping the coffee she offered. Margot kept cutting cookie dough with her cutters, her rhythm unwavering. "Help how?" "Financially, for starters," Wesley replied. "And also, I want to be around, to get to know the girls better, to be part of their lives if you'll let me." Margot stopped what she was doing, her eyes studying him intently. "Why? You barely know us. And from what I understand, you barely knew Conrad these last few years." It was a fair question. Wesley searched for the most honest answer he could give. "Because they're family, my only family now. And because maybe I can fill a little of the void Conrad left." Margot regarded him for several seconds before returning to the cookie dough. "The girls adore you. They talked about you all night." She paused. "But I don't want you to show up in their lives and then vanish. One man has already done that." "I'm not going to vanish," Wesley promised. "I'll be here as long as you'll have me." And so it began. One visit led to another, and soon Wesley had established a regular presence in the small apartment. First, occasional dinners, then weekend visits. Eventually, he was there almost every day, rearranging his work schedule in ways he'd never considered possible. Meetings got shortened. Trips were postponed. Decisions he once insisted on handling personally were now delegated with clear instructions. His phone was never far. He still had a corporate world demanding his attention, but there were boundaries now that hadn't existed before. "Mr. Westfield insists on a meeting in Chicago," Martha informed him by phone 2 weeks later. "He says the contract can't be closed without you." Wesley, sitting at Margot's kitchen table, looked out the window at Ivy and June jumping rope in the building's small courtyard. "Schedule a video conference for tomorrow at 7, Chi," he replied, not taking his eyes off the girls. "If he needs something sooner, I'm available by phone until 8 tonight." "But sir," he offered his private jet. "It would only be one night." "I can't, Martha. I have a commitment here I can't cancel." That commitment was Ivy's ballet recital at school, something that, in his old world, wouldn't have even made it onto his calendar. In the days that followed, Wesley discovered a world that existed alongside his own, a world of simple routines and small but significant obligations, helping June with her math homework, fixing the broken swing at the park, buying groceries for dinner. "You know how to cook?" Margot asked one evening, surprised to see him peeling potatoes with surprising skill. Wesley smiled. "I lived alone during college, learned the basics." What he didn't mention was that for the last 2 decades, he hadn't cooked a single meal. Fine restaurants and takeout had replaced that skill. Now, rediscovering it, he felt a strange satisfaction in creating something as simple as a home-cooked dinner. The highlight of his new routine was picking the girls up from school. At 3 o'clock, he parked his car near the gate and waited among other parents. At first, he felt out of place, a high-powered executive among young mums and a few dads, all of whom knew each other. Over time, he became just another adult waiting for his kids. "Uncle Wesley!" The shout always came first, followed by 2 small figures running toward him, backpacks bouncing, hair messy after a day of learning and play. Ivy always arrived first, flinging herself into his arms with total abandon. June came right after, more reserved but equally affectionate, handing him drawings or schoolwork she deemed worthy of immediate admiration. "I made a map of the planets. My teacher said my story was the best in class. I learned to tie my shoes by myself. Look, every achievement was celebrated, every story heard with genuine attention." As they walked home, Wesley soaked in the details of their day. who sat with whom at lunch, which book the teacher read after recess, the dragonfly that landed on the window during science class. Small, insignificant details to the outside world, but they formed the daily fabric of their lives. Details Wesley never thought he'd find important, yet now they structured his own days. At night, after dinner, a homework routine formed at the kitchen table. Ivy struggled with math but loved to read. June was good with numbers but needed extra help spelling. "Why does this word have a P in the middle? It makes no sense." June would grumble about language quirks. "It comes from Greek," Wesley would explain patiently. "Like psychology. The P is silent, but it's still important." "Words shouldn't have hidden letters," June declared with childlike logic. "That's cheating." At the office, his changes did not go unnoticed. The once workaholic Wesley Wilson now left on time, refused trips, delegated responsibilities he used to guard jealously. "The board is worried," James, and his VP, mentioned during one of the few business lunches Wesley still kept. "They say you seem distant, less involved." Wesley sipped his coffee, pondering the statement. "I'm as involved as I've always been. I'm just managing my time differently." "It's more than that, Wes. You turned down the economic forum in Davos. You cancelled the trip to our Tokyo branch. And yesterday you left in the middle of our quarterly presentation because—" "It was school recital day," Wesley said without hesitation. "June had a piano solo. I promised I'd be there." James studied him as if analyzing an unexpectedly volatile stock chart. "Who are these people, Wes? In all these years working together, I never heard you mention family." Wesley just offered a cryptic smile and changed the subject. How could he explain that he now split his time between running a multinational corporation and helping two 6-year-olds with homework? How could he explain that, for the first time in decades, he felt part of something real? Mornings quickly became his favorite part of the day. Waking up early, sometimes on Margot's sofa when work had kept him there late, and making breakfast for the girls, he discovered each one's preferences. Ivy loved pancakes with honey and strawberries. June preferred cereal with sliced banana in perfect rounds. "Uncle Wesley, are you taking us to school today?" Ivy asked one morning, swinging her legs as she ate. "If your mum says it's okay," Wesley answered, looking over at Margot, who watched the scene with a mix of gratitude and puzzlement. "Sure," she said, checking the time. "Actually, that would be great. I have deliveries to make before noon." And so Wesley found himself integrating into the morning routine, brushing teeth, combing hair, checking backpacks, tying shoelaces. A familiar choreography he never imagined would become part of his life, yet now he performed it with growing competence. "Not like that," June protested when he tried to braid her hair. "Mum does it differently." After several failed attempts, Margot took over, her nimble fingers weaving the blonde locks easily. Wesley watched carefully, determined to learn. "Your hands are too big for delicate work," Margot teased, but her tone was kind. "You'll get it with time." Time. Wesley had plenty of it now, or at least he organized it differently. The same 24 hours he once devoted almost entirely to work were now carefully divided. Meetings were condensed. Reports were read during the girls' bath time. International calls were scheduled for after they were asleep. The walk to school was short but revealing. The girls pointed out landmarks in their personal geography: the tree with a bird's nest, the house with the big dog, the corner store where Mr. Kim sometimes gave out free candy. "Amanda got a new puppy," June informed him, clutching Wesley's hand as they walked. "She's bringing a picture today. And the teacher is teaching about the solar system," added Ivy, skipping along. "Did you know Jupiter is huge? Bigger than all the others put together?" Wesley smiled. "Actually, Jupiter is really big, but not bigger than all the other planets combined. It's larger than the sum of some of them, though." Ivy frowned, thinking about this. "You know a lot, Uncle Wesley, sometimes more than the teacher." The genuine pride in her eyes made Wesley feel something no professional achievement had ever stirred, a mix of humility and responsibility that was both frightening and rewarding. At the school gate, he knelt down to their level, adjusting their scarves and checking their backpack clasps. "Have a great day. I'll be here when you get out." The tight hugs before they ran inside became his fuel for the rest of the day. Even in the most tense meetings, he could still feel the warmth of those small arms around his neck, anchoring him to something real. As the weeks went by, small items of his began to appear in Margot's apartment. A toothbrush in the bathroom, a phone charger plugged into the living room outlet, a few sets of clothes in the towel closet for emergencies, like when June spilled juice on his shirt. In his own apartment, where he spent less and less time, Wesley began making changes. He bought colorful blankets for the minimalist sofa, filled the fridge with real food instead of frozen meals, and on a surprising impulse, called his architect. "I need a renovation," he said as soon as the man answered. "I want to convert the office into 2 kids' rooms, and I need a bigger play area." "Are you planning to have children, Mr. Wilson?" the architect asked, surprised. Wesley hesitated only a second. "I already do, in a way." Evenings became his time for reflection. When Margot was working an extra shift and the girls were in bed, Wesley would sit alone in the small living room, sometimes with his laptop, sometimes just with his thoughts. He would glance around, the worn but comfortable couch, the table marked with pencil scribbles, the drawings on the fridge, the scent of kids' soap. In silence, he looked back at his old life and realized the truth he'd been avoiding. "I spent years in empty rooms, cold hotels, silent dinners. And now 2 little voices wait for me with drawings and questions." The truth about Conrad was still there, hovering like a dark cloud on the horizon. At some point, he would have to reveal it. But for now, Wesley allowed himself to discover the value of a routine he had never experienced, the joy of being present, the privilege of being needed not for money or influence, but simply for who he was. On the kitchen calendar, Margot had marked upcoming events, a dance recital, a science fair, a dentist appointment. Wesley reorganized his professional schedule to be there for each one. He cancelled a trip to Europe and delegated the annual shareholders presentation, events that back 6 months ago he would have considered untouchable. "What's happening to you?" Margot asked one night, after the girls were in bed and they sat together with tea in the quiet kitchen. "Why are you doing all this?" Wesley thought about the question, searching for the most honest answer. "I guess I'm trying to right a wrong," he said finally. "A wrong that started when I left Conrad behind." Margot nodded slowly, as if it made sense. "The girls love you," she said almost reluctantly. "They talk about you all the time." "I've never seen them get attached so quickly to anyone." Wesley felt a lump in his throat. "They're special." "They are," Margot agreed, "and vulnerable. They're used to people leaving." "I'm not leaving," Wesley assured her, surprising them both with the conviction in his voice. "That empty space Conrad left, and I can't fill it completely. Nobody can. But I can be here." The roles were blurred, uncle, guardian, friend. What mattered, he discovered, wasn't the title but the presence, being there when June had nightmares, listening attentively when Ivy told elaborate stories, showing up day after day, building the trust only consistency could create. The emptiness he'd always carried, the space left when he drifted from Conrad, when he chose career over connections, was slowly being filled. Not with possessions or achievements, but with moments, with small daily victories, with the privilege of being called Uncle Wesley by voices that didn't know the whole truth but understood the essential. He was there now. Present. Real. And for the first time in a long while, he was alive. The rain fell steadily outside, forming a curtain of water that separated the small apartment from the rest of the world. The girls had been asleep for hours, exhausted after a day at the Science Museum. Wesley and Margot sat in the living room, a single lamp on board casting a warm yellow glow barely reaching the walls. On the table between them, 2 cups of tea slowly cooled. Margot was sewing a tear in Ivy's ballet dress, her fingers moving with automatic precision. Wesley watched the hypnotic motion of the needle, going in and out of the pale pink fabric. The past few weeks had established a comfortable routine between them. The initial tension and mistrust had dissolved, replaced by a quiet familiarity, not exactly friendship nor something more, rather a silent partnership formed around the girls. "They did well today, didn't they?" Margot said, not looking up from her work. June memorized all the constellation names. The museum guide was impressed. Wesley smiled. recalling the pride on June's face when she corrected the guide on the exact position of the North Star. She has an amazing memory. And Ivy, the way she drew that star map afterward. She has Conrad's artistic touch. His name still hung between them like a presence, not a taboo anymore, but a territory they tread carefully. Over the past few weeks, they had learned to mention him without Margot's pain or Wesley's guilt becoming overwhelming. The rain intensified, beating against the windows. A distant rumble of thunder made the lamp flicker. Wesley glanced toward the hallway, worried. "June will wake up," he said. "She's scared of storms." "How do you know?" Margot asked, finally looking up. Wesley shrugged, a bit embarrassed. "She told me when it thundered last week. She started explaining how lightning forms, to cover up her fear." Margot smiled slightly. "She never told me that. She always tries to act so brave." "Like her mum," Wesley noted. Something in his tone made Margot set her sewing aside and look at him more closely. For a moment, they were silent, only the rain filling the space. "Why are you really here, Wesley?" she asked at last. There was no accusation in her voice, just genuine curiosity. "At first, I thought it was guilt. Then I wondered if it was loneliness, but it's more than that, isn't it?" The question caught Wesley off guard. He had grown used to not verbalizing his motives, a tacit agreement that his presence was welcome without deeper explanations. "I don't know how to answer that," he admitted. "Try," Margot insisted softly. "We've been here for weeks. You've practically moved onto our couch, rearranged your entire life around ours." "Why?" Wesley took a deep breath and looked at his own hands, hands that once signed million-dollar contracts with the same ease he now tied little shoelaces or held fine paintbrushes for the girls. "When my parents died," he began slowly, "I thought the right path was to go up, conquer, build something bigger than all of us. That's what my father always said he expected of me." He paused, organizing thoughts he'd never truly articulated. "Conrad, he always wanted other things. Connections, experiences, things I considered unproductive." Margot nodded, knowing that side of Conrad well. "We argued about it," Wesley continued. "Not big fights, just constant disagreements. He said I was wasting my life on things that didn't matter. I said he needed to grow up and take responsibility." Wesley looked out the window at the pouring rain. "Then one day, I realized we hadn't spoken in months. He called once, left a message. I was in an important meeting, planned to call back later. But then came other meetings, other cities, other commitments." He ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of those choices. "I left my family behind to climb up, and when I noticed, I was alone at the top. These girls, they gave me solid ground. They made me feel. And I don't want to lose that." His words came out more intensely than he planned, loaded with emotions he wasn't used to showing. For a moment, he felt exposed, vulnerable, in a way the corporate world never allowed. Margot didn't reply immediately. She set the pink dress on her lap and looked at Wesley. Her eyes, usually practical and direct, were soft in the lamp's glow. She simply watched him, her silence neither judging nor pressuring, only receiving those words, that confession. It was a silence that didn't weigh. It embraced. Wesley felt something loosen inside him. A knot he'd carried for so long, it had become part of his structure, suddenly eased by Margot's simple acceptance. Outside, the rain began to subside. The moment remained between them, fragile and precious. "They need you too," Margot finally said in a low but steady voice, "more than any of us realized." A door opened in the hallway. Small, sleepy footsteps approached. "Uncle Wesley." June's sleepy voice broke the moment. "There's thunder. Can I stay here for a bit?" Wesley turned, opening his arms. June crossed the room quickly and snuggled against him, her eyes already closing again. "Of course you can," he answered, adjusting her on the couch. "I'm right here." Margot picked up the pink dress and resumed her sewing, a small smile on her lips. Between them there was now a quiet understanding. Too many things had gone unsaid over the course of their lives. Some could never be recovered. But here, in this small apartment, With the rain easing outside and a child dozing between them, there was a chance to build something new from what life would not give back. Wesley woke up early that Sunday morning. He spent some time just lying on Margot's sofa, staring at the ceiling, listening to the apartment's subtle sounds, the low hum of the fridge, the ticking of the kitchen clock, the gentle wind brushing against the window. Today would be the day. He had postponed it far too long. In the last few weeks, with each joyful moment shared with the girls, each peaceful dinner with Margot, the weight of the unrevealed truth grew within him. Conrad was dead. His nieces were waiting for a father who would never return. Margot was holding on to hopes that would never be fulfilled. And Wesley, the only one who knew the truth, was letting them carry on with their waiting. He got up before anyone else and prepared breakfast: pancakes for Ivy, cereal with banana for June, strong coffee for Margot, exactly how they liked it. As though the familiarity of these gestures might somehow ease what was coming next. The girls came down first, still in their pajamas, hair messy from sleep. Wesley felt that now familiar ache in his chest as he saw them, a mix of love and anticipation for the pain he was about to cause. "Uncle Wesley made pancakes," Ivy exclaimed, running to hug his legs. "With maple syrup?" June asked, already climbing onto a chair. "With maple syrup," he confirmed, setting the plate in front of her. When Margot came downstairs, already dressed for the day, Wesley exchanged a meaningful glance with her. "Are we going to the park today?" June asked between spoonfuls. "You promised to teach us how to fly a kite." "Later," Wesley replied. "First, I have something important to talk about with your mom. Can you watch cartoons for an hour?" The girls agreed easily, tempted by the rare treat of morning TV. Once they finished breakfast and went to the living room, Wesley gestured for Margot to follow him to the small balcony. Outside, the morning air was cool, the sky surprisingly clear after days of rain. Margot leaned on the railing, watching the quiet Sunday street below. "You have that look," she said, still facing the street. "The one you get when you have to cancel a plan with the girls because of work." Wesley shook his head. "It's not work. It's something I've been avoiding too long." She turned to face him, her eyes scrutinizing his. Since their conversation on the stormy night, something had changed between them. A deeper understanding, perhaps. A trust that wasn't there before. "It's about Conrad," she said. It wasn't a question. Wesley nodded, gathering courage. "How do you tell someone the person they've been waiting for all these years is never coming back? How do you turn hope into mourning?" "4 years ago," he began, voice low but firm, "I received an official notice. A body had been found after a car accident on a remote road near the state line. Identification took time because there were no documents, only a few belongings." Margot remained very still, her eyes fixed on him as he spoke. Wesley went on, each sentence deliberately measured. "Among those belongings was a small sketchbook, drawings I recognized immediately. The coroner's office managed to trace it to me through the company. They asked me to identify the body." Wesley took a deep breath, suddenly finding the morning air insufficient. "Conrad is gone, Margot. It was an accident. The car went off the road in a dangerous stretch on a rainy night." The words hung between them, weighted and final. Margot didn't move or speak. She just kept looking at him, as if her mind was still processing what she had heard. "I took care of it all," Wesley continued, now speaking faster. "The funeral, it was small, just me. I didn't know about you or the girls. There was nothing among his things to show family." The last word came out painfully. Wesley saw the exact moment reality sank in for Margot. Tears filled her eyes, though they didn't fall right away. Her hands clutched the balcony railing tightly. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked at last, her voice surprisingly steady. "Why let us keep waiting for so long?" The guilt Wesley had carried since that first day at the station now felt like 1,000 tons. "At first, I didn't know about you. Then, after I met the girls at the station, I didn't know how to tell you. And then..." He hesitated. "I delayed because I was afraid that once you knew the truth, there'd be no more place for me here." Margot closed her eyes for a moment, tears now silently rolling down her cheeks. "And now?" she asked. Wesley stepped closer, not touching her, but making sure she heard every word clearly. "Now, I won't go, no matter what happens. I'm not leaving. If you'll let me stay, this is where I want to be." The silence between them lasted minutes or seconds. Wesley couldn't tell. Eventually, Margot opened her eyes and looked at him directly. "He's never coming back," she said, as if testing the reality of her own words. "All these years, waiting, imagining, inventing stories for the girls." Her voice broke. Wesley edged nearer, offering silent support. "You know what's odd?" Margot continued, wiping away a tear with the back of her hand. "A part of me always knew. Who just disappears without a word, without calling. I think I made up all those stories for the girls for myself too." "I'm sorry," Wesley said, painfully aware of how inadequate those words were. To his surprise, Margot did something unexpected. She inhaled deeply, a long and shaky breath, and then her shoulders relaxed, as though she was setting down a weight she'd carried for years. "The waiting is over," she said softly. "I can stop waiting now." Wesley realized that, however painful the truth was, there was relief in knowing. The limbo of uncertainty might be harsher than definitive mourning. At last, the waiting could transform into memory. Margot leaned on the rail, looking up at the clear sky. "How will we tell them?" she asked, maternal worry taking over immediately. "They're so little." Wesley had thought about it a lot. "We can do it together." "Right now, if you're ready." She hesitated, then nodded. "Now, before I lose my courage." They went back inside. The girls were immersed in a cartoon, giggling at something on TV. Wesley felt his heart clench, thinking of how that laughter might soon turn to tears. Margot turned the television off, ignoring the immediate protests. "Mommy and Uncle Wesley need to talk to you about something very important," she said, sitting on the sofa and calling the girls over. Ivy and June came closer, sensing the seriousness in their mother's tone. Wesley knelt before them, meeting their eye level. For a moment, he feared he wouldn't be able to speak. Margot placed a hand on his shoulder, a small gesture that gave him strength. They were in this together. "You remember how you always go to the station to wait for Daddy?" Wesley began softly. The girls nodded, eyes focused. "And you remember, Mom said that one day he would come back?" he continued. They nodded again. Wesley glanced at Margot, who took a deep breath before speaking. "Something happened to your dad, something we didn't know until now," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "He can't come back home, sweethearts." "Did he get another job even farther away?" June asked, frowning. Wesley felt a sharp pain in his throat. Margot took her daughter's hands in hers. "Your daddy turned into a little star," she said gently, glancing at the sky through the window. "He's up there shining, watching you grow." Silence filled the room, confusion evident in the girls' faces. They looked from their mother to Wesley, trying to process this. "Like a star?" Ivy asked in a small voice. "People don't turn into stars." Wesley stepped in, choosing his words carefully. "When very special people leave this world, their light doesn't disappear. It goes up to the sky and becomes a new star. That way, they can keep watching over the ones they love, even from far away." "Daddy died?" June asked directly, surprising Wesley and Margot with her clarity. Margot nodded, tears sliding down again. "Yes, honey. It was an accident a long time ago. We only just found out." "That's why he never came back," June concluded, her little face processing the information with a seriousness beyond her years. Ivy, unlike her sister, burst into immediate tears, throwing herself into her mother's arms. "But I wanted to meet him for real, not just from a photo." Wesley's heart broke at those words. Margot held her daughter tight, their tears flowing together. For several minutes, the room was filled only with Ivy's sobs and Margot's whispered comforts. June stayed seated, quiet, her eyes locked on Wesley's as if seeking further confirmation. "Uncle Wesley," she finally said, her voice steady despite her watery eyes. "You knew Daddy really well, right?" Wesley nodded, reaching out his hand to hers. "I did. We grew up together. So you can tell us everything about him, everything we don't know?" "I can," Wesley promised. "Every story, every detail I remember." June seemed to consider this, as though deciding if it was enough. Then, surprisingly, she stood and went to the window, looking up at the blue morning sky. "Can we still tell him things?" she asked without turning around. "Even though he's a star now?" Wesley followed, kneeling beside her at the window. He looked at the sky with her, feeling a lump in his throat. "Yes," he answered with conviction, "and he'll be listening." June nodded, satisfied with that answer. After a moment, she reached for Wesley's hand, a quiet gesture of trust that spoke more than any words could. The next few minutes were difficult. More questions came. Some Wesley and Margot were ready for. Others caught them off guard. Did it hurt when he turned into a star? Did he know we were going to be born? Why didn't he send a letter from the star? Wesley learned that sometimes honesty had to be softened with kindness. No, it probably didn't hurt. "Oh, he didn't know about you, but he would have been so happy. Stars can't send letters, but they can send light." Gradually, Ivy's tears subsided. June remained thoughtful, processing things in her own way. Margot seemed simultaneously exhausted and relieved, as if she'd run a marathon and finally crossed the finish line. "We don't have to go to the station anymore," Ivy finally asked, wiping her face with the sleeve of her pajamas. Margot and Wesley exchanged glances. It was a question they hadn't prepared for. "We could go to the park instead," Wesley suggested. "Today even, and bring that kite I promised to teach you to fly." "We can show it to Dad from the park," June asked. "He'll see the kite in the sky." Wesley felt something warm and heavy in his chest. Not painful, just intense. "I'm sure he will," he answered. "That's the closest we can get to him right now." Surprisingly, the girls accepted that. With the resilience children often show, they cried, grieved, and began to adapt their world to this new reality. Hours later, at the park, while Wesley helped June keep the red kite aloft in the bright sky, Margot approached. They watched the girls together, Ivy laughing as she ran in circles waiting for her turn. June focused on holding the kite steady. "Thank you," Margot said softly, "for telling us." "For staying." Wesley looked at her, seeing the traces tears had left on her face, but also a calmness in her eyes. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked, genuine doubt in his voice. Margot gazed at her daughters before answering. "We will," she said, with surprising certainty. "There's pain, but it comes with light." Wesley followed her gaze to the sky, where the red kite danced against the infinite blue. Yes, there was pain. Conrad's loss was real and tangible for him, for Margot, for the girls. But there was also something new, a shared truth, an improvised family bound not by what they had lost, but by what they had found in each other. The pain was real, but it came with light. The sun was just rising when Wesley parked his car at the gates of Pine Creek Cemetery, a quiet place on the outskirts of town, with old trees casting long shadows over the headstones. He chose to come early when it would be empty. This moment had to be just between him and Conrad. He carried a simple bouquet of sunflowers. Conrad had always liked them. He said they were honest flowers, always turning their faces to the sun with no pretense. Wesley almost hadn't brought them. It felt strange to bring flowers to his brother's grave after so long, but something inside him insisted. Some symbolic gestures are needed, even if they come late. The cemetery was silent at this hour, only distant birdsong and the occasional rustling of leaves. Wesley walked the stone path he knew well, though he'd only been here once, 4 years ago. His steps were slow, measured, as if delaying the inevitable. It had rained the previous night, and the scent of damp earth filled the air. A smell of life, ironically, in this place of final rest. Dew still clung to the grass between the gravestones, soaking the hem of his pants as he walked. 4 years. 4 years since he'd stood there, alone, watching Conrad's casket lowered into the ground. At the time, he hadn't cried, He'd treated the event like another task, efficiently arranged, neatly executed, quickly filed away. No emotion, no genuine mourning, just an awareness that yet another chapter of his life was closed. Now it was different. Now he knew Ivy and June. He knew Margot. He knew the life Conrad had built and then left behind. He knew the stories, the laughter, the little family traditions. Now he truly felt the loss, not as a line item in his planner, but as a palpable absence. The headstone was simple. A grey granite stone bearing only his name, the dates, and a short inscription. Artist, dreamer, forever free. Wesley had chosen those words almost randomly at the time, based on distant memories of his teenage brother. Today, he realized how fitting they really were. Conrad, the artist who sketched stories in the margins of textbooks. Conrad, the dreamer who gazed at the stars while Wesley pored over charts. Conrad, forever seeking a freedom Wesley never truly understood. Wesley knelt before the cold stone, placing the sunflowers against it. He ran his fingers over the carved name, Conrad Wilson, letters etched in stone, an attempt to capture a complex life in a simple name. Around him, the cemetery was beginning to stir. A distant groundskeeper was trimming grass. An elderly woman walked slowly among the headstones, likely visiting a lost spouse. Life went on, even in a place devoted to death. "I don't know where to start," Wesley said quietly. He'd never been the type to talk in cemeteries, always thinking it somewhat sentimental. But today, words felt necessary. "I met your daughters," he went on, voice barely above a whisper. "They're extraordinary, Conrad. Ivy has your knack for art, and June, well, she has your stubbornness." A small bird perched briefly on the headstone, eyed Wesley curiously, then flew off. The sun now fully illuminated the cemetery, creating golden reflections in the dew-covered grass. "They were waiting for you at the station every week, with that photo of you, the one from that summer before I left for college. Remember that summer? We went fishing at the lake every day." Wesley inhaled deeply. Memories he had locked away were flowing freely now, the smell of wood in that lake cabin, Conrad's laughter when they caught that huge fish and released it because he looked like he was having a bad day, the stars they watched while lying on the pier. "Margot is amazing, strong in ways I never was. She raised 2 girls on her own, always telling them you'd come back one day." Wesley closed his eyes for a moment, letting the morning sun warm his face. "I should have looked for you when you vanished. I should have cared more. I should have been a brother." The words hurt as they came out, laden with years of guilt and regret. The weight he'd carried since receiving that official letter, since quietly identifying the body and burying it without ceremony. "You never told them about me. Margot didn't even know I existed." A brief pause. "I can't blame you. I deserve to be erased." A soft breeze stirred the petals of the sunflowers. Wesley adjusted the bouquet, a mechanical gesture to steady his emotions. "We told them that you left forever. We said you became a star." He let out a slight laugh at the memory. "June asked if she could still talk to you, looking at the sky. I said yes." A long silence followed. Wesley just stayed there, kneeling, letting emotions he'd bottled up finally surface. He didn't cry. Tears had never come easily to him, but he felt something release in his chest like a knot being untied. "I came too late, brother," he finally said, his voice steadier. "But I'm here now, with them, and I'm staying." The promise lingered in the morning air, heavier because he made it there in front of Conrad. It was a commitment not just to his brother's memory, but to the life Wesley was now consciously choosing. He remained a few more minutes in silence, the cemetery gradually filled with more visitors, more distant footsteps, more subdued conversations. The day pressed on. At last, Wesley stood. He passed his hand once more over the engraved name. "I'll be back soon," he promised. "With the girls when they're ready. They need to know this part of you too." As he walked back to the car, Wesley felt different, lighter, though sad, more connected to the world around him. The grief he'd postponed for 4 years finally had a place to exist, and with it, the possibility of moving forward. Before getting into the car, he looked up at the clear autumn sky. Somewhere, Conrad was watching. And maybe, just maybe, he approved of what Wesley was trying to do. It wasn't redemption or compensation for lost time. It was simply a new beginning, a new chapter. The showdown he had dreaded for so long ended quietly, without shouting or recriminations. Just a simple promise made in a peaceful cemetery on an autumn morning. I'm staying. Snow was gently falling outside, covering the yard in a soft white blanket of silence. 6 months had passed since Wesley told them the truth about Conrad. 6 months of adjustments, occasional tears, and a peace that gradually grew like the small tree they'd planted in the backyard of the new house. Wesley watched the girls from the living room couch as they worked on a science project on the rug. June was drawing clouds on a blue poster board, patiently explaining the concept of condensation to her sister, who was sticking cotton balls for texture. Even at 7, June demonstrated a grasp of scientific ideas that impressed her teachers at Wellington Academy. Enrolling the twins in that prestigious school was one of the first big steps Wesley took to help. Convincing Margot hadn't been easy. "I can't let you pay for such an expensive school," she protested when Wesley first suggested it. "It's too much. They're fine at public school." "This isn't for you," he replied. "It's for them, for their future. They deserve every opportunity they can get. June loves science, and Ivy has an artistic talent that should be nurtured." After many discussions, they found a compromise. Wesley would pay for school and set up a college fund, but Margot would make all decisions about raising them. It was a balance that worked well for their unconventional family. "Wesley, what's an atom?" June asked, looking up from her project. "The teacher explained it, but I forgot the exact definition." "It's the smallest unit of an element that still keeps its properties," Wesley answered, "like a tiny building block of everything that exists." "Even us?" Ivy asked, fascinated by the idea. "Especially us," Wesley smiled. "Billions and billions of atoms, all working together." In the kitchen, Margot was at her sewing machine at the gentle hum of the motor drifting through the open doorway. Wesley could see her focused on the fabric, a small crease of concentration between her eyebrows. The studio they set up 3 months before was already bearing fruit. Margot had enough orders to quit her job at the repair shop and focus on her own brand. Transition hadn't been easy for her. She hated accepting help. But when Wesley presented it as a business investment, with formal contracts and clear expectations, she finally agreed. Her first line of children's dresses sold out in 2 weeks. Now she was working on a women's line to launch in spring. "Who wants hot chocolate?" Margot asked, turning off the machine and walking into the living room. 3 hands shot up immediately, including Wesley's. It was a little nightly tradition they had established, hot chocolate on winter evenings, while the girls finished homework or just talked about their day at school. "With marshmallows, please," Ivy said without looking up from the project. "And cinnamon in mine," Wesley added, receiving a small smile from Margot. The house they lived in now was different from the cramped apartment where Wesley first met them. It wasn't luxurious, Margot insisted on that, but spacious enough for everyone, with a small backyard where the girls could play. It was just a few blocks from their school, so they could walk together when it wasn't snowing. The decision to move in together happened naturally, without big discussions. First, there were nights Wesley crashed on the apartment sofa because it was too late to go home. Then his clothes started migrating. Finally, the house proposal. "It makes sense," Margot said with her usual practicality, "for the girls, for all of us." The arrangement was clear. They weren't a romantic couple, just 2 adults committed to the well-being of 2 children, a family built by choice, not by convention. Whatever the future might hold beyond that was a question neither felt in a hurry to answer. Wesley's phone vibrated in his pocket, likely James again, with questions about the company's transition. Wesley's decision to step down as CEO had shocked the business world. He hadn't left entirely. He was still a consultant and board member, but the long hours, the endless trips, and the marathon meetings were behind him. "Are you out of your mind?" James asked when Wesley announced his decision. "We've worked 20 years to get here. We have the Hartley Tech acquisition in progress. The board is counting on you for the Asian project." "I found something more important," Wesley simply replied. He didn't elaborate. How could he explain that 2 little girls on a train platform had completely reshaped his priorities? James still lived in the world Wesley once inhabited, a world where the next deal, the next acquisition, the next quarterly profit were the only measures of success. Margot returned from the kitchen carrying a tray with steaming mugs, interrupting his thoughts. 10 more minutes, then let's clean up," she said, placing the tray on the small table. "It's getting late." "But tomorrow's Saturday," Ivy protested, grabbing her mug. "And we're going to the museum," June reminded him. "Uncle Wesley promised to show us the dinosaurs." "And I'll keep my promise," Wesley assured them. "But your mum's right. We need to get up early to enjoy the whole day." Wesley watched Margot sit in the armchair, checking messages on her phone. Her face lit up with a small smile. "Another order?" he asked, recognizing her expression. "Mrs. Peterson wants 3 dresses for her granddaughters for Christmas," Margot said, sounding pleased. "And she's not haggling over the price this time." "Your work is getting noticed," Wesley commented. "You deserve it. You've always been talented." "Thanks to your initial investment," Margot said. "I don't know how I'll ever properly thank you for all—" "No need," Wesley gently cut in. "Really, this is how family works. Family." The word still surprised him sometimes, springing naturally to mind. He had a family now, not by blood alone. Only the girls were actually connected to him through Conrad, but by something real, formed by daily choices. "Time to clean up," Margot announced when the mugs were empty. "The project looks great, girls." "Miss Winters says grades aren't as important as understanding the concept," June recited seriously. "But getting an A is still cool," Ivy added with a mischievous grin. The two started gathering their materials, carefully putting away the delicate parts of their diorama. Wesley got up to help, picking up glue sticks and scissors. "Uncle Wesley," Ivy called, "can you tell the story about Dad and the boat tonight? June says she doesn't remember it well." The boat story. One of their favorites, Conrad at 12, building a wooden boat with their dad, insisting he'd sail it all the way to the ocean. The boat sank as soon as it touched the lake, but Conrad kept at it for weeks. "Sure," Wesley said. "After you're ready for bed." The girls headed upstairs, and Wesley approached the shelf in the living room. Among books and small decorative objects, shells gathered at the beach, colorful rocks found by June, framed drawings by Ivy, were 2 photos that stood out. The first, a picture of Conrad, the same one the girls took to the station. The easy smile, the bright eyes full of possibility. Wesley sometimes wondered if Conrad would approve of what he was doing, if he'd think it was right for the estranged brother to raise his daughters now. In the quietest moments of the night, Wesley imagined conversations with his late brother, asking for permission, guidance, forgiveness. The second frame was a recent photo. Wesley saw Margot, Ivy, and June having a picnic in the park. The girls wore flower crowns, Margot looked serene, and Wesley, almost unrecognizable to anyone who'd known him in his corporate sphere, appeared relaxed, with a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Thinking?" Margot asked quietly, coming up behind him. "Remembering," Wesley replied. "How it all started, that business trip, the girls at the station." "Fate," Margot remarked, not hiding a hint of irony. "Maybe," Wesley agreed, "or maybe Conrad, still looking out for all of us in his own way." Margot gently touched Conrad's photo, a silent gesture of acknowledgement. "We're ready!" Ivy shouted from the top of the stairs. "I'll go up," Wesley said. "Are you coming?" "In a minute," Margot replied. "I need to finish embroidering Mrs. Templeton's dress. But leave the door open so I can listen to the story too." Wesley climbed the stairs, finding the girls already in their beds, June in her blue cloud pajamas with an astronomy book on the nightstand, Ivy in her pink unicorn pajamas hugging a worn-out teddy bear she'd had since she was a baby. Their room was an enchanting mix of their interests. On one side, solar system posters, on the other, colorful drawings and art projects. Sitting on the chair between the beds, Wesley began. "So, the boat. It was summer, one of our last at the lake house. Conrad was about 12, the age you two will be soon." While he spoke, Wesley noticed Margot in the doorway, quietly listening with a small smile. He told them how Conrad insisted on building the boat alone, refusing help from their dad. How he miscalculated its weight and balance, how it flipped the moment it touched the water. And how Silkim, instead of giving up, Conrad spent weeks adjusting, recalculating, trying again. And after the boat sank for the 3rd time, do you know what Conrad said? "At least this time it floated for 10 minutes. The girls chorused. "Exactly." He never saw it as failure. He saw it as 10 minutes of success and another chance to do better next time. Wesley grinned at the girls, whose eyelids were heavy. That's something you inherited from your dad. Never giving up. A few minutes later, with the girls fast asleep, Wesley returned to the living room. He made himself a cup of tea and sat on the couch, picking up his book. But as always, his eyes drifted to the photos on the shelf. The day before, there had been a parent-teacher meeting at school. Wesley cleared his entire schedule to attend. He sat in the child-sized chairs, listening intently as the teacher praised June's progress in science and Ivy's creativity in art. Then he took the girls out for ice cream to celebrate. No one at school knew him as the powerful executive he once was. There, he was simply Uncle Wesley, the man who never missed a meeting, who helped with homework, who clapped at every school performance. The previous week had been career day. June asked Wesley to come talk about his work. "But you don't have to talk about being a CEO," she said, surprising him. You can talk about how you help us with homework and read us stories. That's cooler." That moment, more than any board meeting, stayed with him. Years ago, from the height of his 20th floor office, Wesley thought he'd reached the top. Now, sitting on a slightly worn sofa in a modest but cozy house, he realized just how wrong he'd been. Outside the window, snow kept falling silently. Wesley watched the flakes for a while, reflecting on how small, seemingly insignificant things, a business trip, 2 children on a train platform, an old photo, could completely change the course of a life. The fund he set up for the girls would ensure they could study wherever they wanted. The house, though modest, was jointly owned by him and Margot, providing stability. The sewing business was thriving, giving Margot not just financial security, but purpose and pride. But beyond the material provisions, Wesley found something far more valuable: presence, being there every day. Listening to who made a new friend at school, helping with fractions, applauding new sketches, drying tears. The simple routine he never experienced, filled with small moments that together formed a full life. It was just another business trip, he thought, feeling a gentle certainty settle in his chest. But I found a family. And at last I found my place. Outside, the snow kept covering the world with new possibilities. Inside the simple house, now filled with peace, Wesley Wilson, once defined solely by his work, finally rested in the place he'd been seeking all along without knowing it. A place that was now home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.